All right. Hey there, it's Brian Sebastian, Movie Reviews and More, Woman on TV.tv, iTube 247 out of Franklin, Tennessee, and the Woman's Broadcast TV Network. And I've never had the opportunity to interview this young man, but I've always admired his work for the last 20, over 25 years for Village Voice. The two books that he's read, I read one of them out of the couple that he's had. But none other than the other least I should say this is, I've always looked up to what he did. Michael, introduce yourself for the audience of who you are, where you came from, as that typical New Yorker who's very, very strong-willed, but always determined.
Thank you very much. I'm Michael Musto. For many years, I wrote a column for the Village Voice, which unfortunately has departed us. The Voice folded. But I'm really everywhere. I write for everybody. I've been on every TV channel known to man. I've written 4 books, which are Downtown, which was a nonfiction guide. Manhattan on the Rocks was a novel. And then I had 2 collections, which were La Dolce Musto and Fork on the Left, Knife in the Back. And I comment on nightlife, gossip, movies, theater, politics, everything. I've always been openly gay. So that's made me kind of special on the journalistic landscape.
I think that's one of the things that, there's many things why I admired you. You're always out there. You're always up front. You always had this pizzazz of what I saw, what you always do. You still have it. Talk about what's not going on. What's the gossip that's not really being gossiped? And is it hard to find today's gossip? Because we don't know, is it?
Oh, there's plenty of gossip. The thing is, it's all changed because celebrities gossip on themselves. If you read Twitter, the celebrities are dishing themselves and revealing things that they normally wouldn't have because they would have been very protected in the past. You can actually communicate with celebrities on Twitter and get into a conversation. I feel that since Trump became president, and by the way, I'm not a fan, I don't know how you feel, he took the place of gossip because everything he does isn't really politics. It's not serious. It's not credible. It's gossip. It's sliming people. And I feel that a lot of the channels that used to book gossip columnists to talk about Paris Hilton or Kim Kardashian now just cover politics because it's a lot more fascinating and it really has become the new celebrity gossip.
Talk about the day when you first got your job at the Village Voice, and then talk about what was the last day? What was that feeling like?
Well, I had already written some pieces for the Village Voice for several years, and then in 1984 they had an opening for a columnist. I wrote them a letter saying to the woman that I worked with at the Voice named Karen Durbin, saying if you're looking for someone, consider me. And they actually had me do a sample column, like as an audition. And the great thing is they even paid me for the audition. I thought that was very professional. And I didn't actually think I would get it. I just thought, oh, my career's over. I was 29 already and thought I was toast. Can you imagine? And then I got the call that you got it. And it was a wonderful rush because having that column, the Village Voice was something that everybody read at that point. And I knew that it was a very valuable space to have. And my column went from a third of a page to eventually a full page in the paper. And then I was doing, for the last 5 years, full page plus blogs every day. The column was La Dolce Musto and the blog was La Daily Musto. And I really was like exhausted by the end of the week when I was like blogging all day. You know what it's like. And then at the end of the week, I'd have to come up with a full page column as well for the paper. But I did everything possible to keep the paper going. But eventually they went web only. And then even the website kind of died. The web is still open for Village Voice archives. But it was sad, but it was almost inevitable that journalism is kind of on the wane. There's so much competition. Everybody has a website. It's hard to get advertising dollars. And the Village Voice was always an alternative. And really the mainstream took over the alternative. Drag races on TV. I used to be one of the few people writing about drag queens. Now the whole world loves drag queens. So it was a whole different scene now where the alternative weekly of The Voice wasn't as unique as it used to be. And I understood the reason why it had to eventually evaporate.
But you know what? I still look up to you. I'm more of a movie guy, but I have transpired to other things now, but it always goes back to basics. You will always be one of those better writers out there. I would say one of the world's best writers out there that I've always read throughout the years. It was always fun picking that up, knowing when I would go to New York from Los Angeles or from Vegas, knowing that, okay, what did he write today? What's relevant? Where can I go as that person visiting? Because I grew up in Connecticut. I never wanted to live in New York. I always wanted to be in Los Angeles. But I did go and visit, and I stayed at the Essex House or the 4 seasons. I'm like, okay, where can I go? All right, what's Michael writing about today? That was always fun to me.
Thank you. Well, part of the joy of working for the Village Voice was that it really was a paper for the writers. And when I started the column, they said, do whatever you want with it. They knew that I was plugged into movies, nightlife, etc. But when I said, well, what exactly do you want me to write? They said, no, you do whatever you want. And you won't know how far to go until you've gone too far. We're giving you that freedom. And having done a lot of freelance at that point, I knew that you're always writing for a publication and what the restrictions are. You're always kind of self-consciously writing for a publication. You can't just let loose. At the Village Voice, they just said let loose. And that was the most liberating advice I ever had as a writer. And it helped me find my voice as a writer. At first, I was just too nasty. Everything was nasty. I thought that was the way to make waves. And then I learned to mix it up and show your appreciation. Because I do love celebrities. I love movies. Movies have saved my life on many occasions. In fact, during this whole lockdown period, I'm going back on YouTube and looking at all my favorite old good, bad movies that are free. You don't even have to pay. And I'm watching them for like the 100th time, some of them.
What have you been?
So every time I see one of my favorite movies, it's like the first time. It's like when you have sex with somebody and it's good. It's like the first time, even though you've been partners for a long time. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you know, it's funny.
Movies are like
the Classic Movie Film Festival this year. You know, Leonard Maltin was going to be for that, and South by Southwest, he was going to have his awards for that. You know, there's very few of us left. You know, I mean, I want to do a show with David Sheen, talking about what he did from Los Angeles, what he did for so many years. There's really, it's like a lost art. I mean, that's why I guess I'm really kind of still looking up to what you do. There is no Gene Shalit anymore.
Well,
no,
you're wrong. I have to disagree. Look on Rotten Tomatoes. There are so many critics all around the country. I think there are more than ever. I feel a little lost this year because there are no screenings, obviously. So at best, you could kind of request a screening link and watch something on your computer. But I'm so used to every night, literally every night, going to screenings.
Right.
And I'm kind of lost. The last movie I left the house to really see was Invisible Man with Elizabeth Moss, which I thought was terrific.
That was the last movie I saw in Los Angeles. I think it was like February 24th.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
in the theater, yeah, but you know, I'm still keeping track of everything, and I'm still seeing on Hulu and Netflix, and then the private links and stuff. Yeah.
To me, it's not the same to sit and watch a link. I like to be in the screening room. I like to be with other critics. You can kind of feel a certain response in the communal experience.
Well, one of the things I've been missing is holidays, I'm usually doing my own marathon. I mean, I was just working all day yesterday, and, you know, with all the stuff, you know, with 15,000 views, actually 17,000 views away from 1 million on YouTube. I thought I was going to be there a year ago. That's one of the hardest things I've ever had to work. But overall, you know, I've been enjoying the platforms for stuff. So I still think of myself as a traditionalist, where I started when I was looking up to people back in the day, and I still admire that. I came out of working at a video store, so I miss being able to go and do that. There was no movie you could go see over the weekend. So I was just watching stuff that I had. I was like, this is not fun. I like going and getting my popcorn. You can't go do it right now. If you had to go, Michael, if you had to go to the theater by yourself to see a screening, would you go minus the crowd? Would you go to the theaters in general, like we would normally? And then would you go see it in the audience if you had to?
It would have to be like a total of like 5 people in the whole room. So it's not going to happen. If they do start having screenings, I'm going to have to beg off because it's usually a full house for these movies. And I do remember the days of going to video stores. I love that era of my life. I would go to Tower Video. There was a place called Kim's, which had at least 3 outlets here in Manhattan, which had off the beaten rack movies. And there was something about going there in person and picking, like looking on the shelf and, oh, I want this, or I'm in the mood for film noir or a romantic comedy. I know everything's at our fingertips now. It's way easier now. I'm not complaining. But I do romanticize in my mind that video era. And that's one way to see movies alone. So that kind of prepared me now. There's no way I'm going to a screening. They're not having them anyway, so it's not even an option. They're having some drive-in events. I don't drive, so.
Well, you know, the interesting thing about that is there's been a lot of people going to drive-in theaters now. Okay, good for you. I mean, I remember doing that back in Connecticut. That's the thing to do. So, hey, anything to get the word out, that's good. but I don't see anything coming back between now and the end of the year. I don't even think Bond is going to come out at the end of the year. I don't know. I could be wrong. You know, I don't see anything until December. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Supposedly some Russell Crowe film is the first one that's testing the waters. We'll see how that goes. I don't want to die for Russell Crowe. We'll see by December when we have big movies like West Side Story and all the Oscar movies, we'll see where we are at that point. If they're really going to want to open in a Cineplex and have tons of people lining up. I have no idea where. I can't predict the future. I'm the one who said Madonna was going nowhere, so I'm a terrible psychic. But we have to take it one step at a time and see where it leads us. I hear people on, I live for the Academy Awards. To me, it's like the gay Olympics. But I see people now on Twitter talking about what's going to be nominated. It's like, I don't even care. This year, I honestly don't even care. I don't think it's of any interest or importance. This year is just,
did you get a chance to see, Michael, did you get a chance to see Hollywood on Netflix? And if you did, what was your point of view on that? Because I thought it was pretty good, except for a couple things here and there.
I don't get hooked on new TV shows because I've gotten into the habit of seeing theater, because I see every Broadway show and all the new movies. Not this year, I'm not doing anything, but I'm just in the habit of doing that, so I make sure to not binge watch TV or I'll never leave the house.
Yeah.
Even now that I couldn't leave the house, I still didn't watch them. But I don't really like reworkings of history. I don't, I also feel like a lot of it sounded like it was borrowed from Scotty Bowers' book. Scotty Bowers died last year. He didn't have any money when he died, and he could have used a nice paycheck. So if people are going to appropriate history, I'd say give credit and pay.
What would your advice be?
But I like anything about Hollywood.
Well,
Say again?
I said, what would your advice be now for some of the upcoming writers who might be just, it's hard to say, people that would have been graduating school, graduating college. What advice would you give to them as that veteran of what to do now?
You know what? When I started way back in the 1970s, people told me, don't go into freelance writing, you'll never make it. And I ignored them. I'm glad I ignored them because they were wrong. They had just failed themselves, so they wanted to pass off their negative advice. Now it's really a million times worse of a landscape, and I'm not even just talking about the COVID and all the lockdowns, which have destroyed a lot of businesses by necessity, but I'm talking about journalism in general. It's really difficult to make it as a writer. That being said, if you really feel you can't do anything else, if you have a passion for it, if you're aggressive, if you're not afraid of deadlines, I would say do it. I'm not going to be that person to say don't do it. And be aggressive. Get your work out there. Learn to find your voice by writing a lot, just like I did, and promote yourself. But I would advise, if you can, to have a backup plan.
When you
have a second, have family money if you can, because it's not easy.
No, it's not. When you were locked down, did you go into that writing mode for your next book? And if you didn't do that, what were you thinking about? What were you doing?
I felt that I should have been writing another book, but I wasn't motivated. In a way, I wasted some time by not doing that. But I can write a book whenever I want. I'm sure I will write more. But basically, yeah, I was writing a lot about the current situation, whether it was about the COVID, whether it was celebrity roundups of responses to the COVID, or the best movies to watch for escapism, and all kinds of critiques that I was doing on the current situation. And then when all the protests, the Black Lives Matter and all that kind of thing erupted, I was writing about that as well. So there was no lack of incredible topics to write about, despite the lockdown. I mean, I had no lack of inspiration as far as what to write about.
When you think of, I always think of this. People would ask me, what was the 2 or 3 movies that kind of hit you? I always go back to the first one. Not that it's the best one, but it's the first one that I remember actually sitting through. And that was It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. When I was a little kid, I sat through the whole thing, intermission, and I loved it. I sat through the re-release of Gone Through the Wind, and I remember watching it 3 times on the big screen, and I still loved the movie. I just thought it was great filmmaking. That's how I saw it. That was my thing. And then Enter the Dragon. Those kind of 3 movies like that. I became a martial artist from watching Bruce Lee from that. Can you remember those movies that touched you? even though you might not have gone into the movie world, or did you know you were going to write about movies? I don't know. Did you?
No, I did, because as a kid, as a pre-adolescent and an adolescent, I was very shy. I'm an only child and didn't even have imaginary friends. But we had a local theater in Brooklyn where I grew up called the Walker Theater. And for $1, you would see some movie that had like crash landed there. They hardly ever had like really A-list movies. It was always movies that didn't make it. And I came to adore those movies because at that point, 2 hours of escapism was all I wanted. I didn't care if it was
Absolutely.
good or bad. And my two favorites were both about adultery comedies. The April Fools, which no one's ever heard of. Jack Lemmon is married to Sally Kellerman. He wants to get away from her. He runs. Do you know this movie? He runs into Catherine Deneuve at a party at his boss's house. His boss is Peter Lawford. They have a wonderful romantic weekend. Turns out Catherine Deneuve is his boss's wife. She's unhappy in her marriage, and they both, at the end, run off to Paris as you hear Dionne Warwick sing a Burt Bacharach song, The April Fools. It's an enchanting film. And my other favorite comedy about adultery at the same time was called Guide for the Married Man. It was directed by Gene Kelly. Yeah. And it was Robert Morris telling Walter Matthau, who for a change is playing like a nice guy. Robert Morris is the shady guy telling Walter Matthau how to cheat on his wife. And every time he tells him a story about do this or don't do that, it dissolves into like a sketch, a comedy sketch with people like Lucille Ball, Sid Caesar, Phil Silvers, all the big comic talent of the time. So it's like a big variety show. And then the punchline at the end is that Walter Matthau's wife is Ingrid Stevens, who's like the most beautiful woman on earth. And of course, he would never want to cheat on her. When I would get home from these movies, I would actually write reviews for myself on index cards, just for myself, write a little review, and give it a star rating, and put it in a little file box. So I knew I was a movie critic in the making because that was my way of communication. I wasn't very verbal, but that was my way of expressing myself. And let me just say, the third movie, I have an aunt who was a nun, Sister Rosario. She was my Aunt Dorothy, and she took me to see The Sound of Music. And we got in free because she was a nun. Oh, you come in free. We're not going to charge nuns for a nun movie. So that immediately addicted me to the complimentary lifestyle. But I also loved the movie. It had everything. It had, drama and comedy and puppets and wonderful music, and Julie Andrews I adored. Gone with the Wind, I'm not sure anymore. I wouldn't go near that right now. But I know what you mean. It's beautifully filmed as a work of filmmaking. But it's so cuckoo crazy that I'm not surprised it's being
and I tell people, I'm like, you know what? I was brought up where I went to video stores. Supposedly, this is what I was told. You have to watch every single movie in there, which is what I did. And then I got into ordering those titles. And then when people came into the stores, you had to give them what they were looking for. If someone came in and they weren't happy, give them a good comedy. I knew in Los Angeles, we had 16 movie theaters in the Westwood area of California. And then we had 23 video stores. So we had 3 independents. So I had to order for San Fernando Valley, I had to order for Westwood, I had to order for Brentwood, and the 3 different tastes. So that's how I got a chance to discover what people like, give them what they wanted, send them home happy. They didn't like it, obviously you'd come back, get a free rental. And then I'd have a couple of celebrities come in and say, hey, you're pretty good at this. Why don't you get into movie reviews? I'm like, well, how do you do that? I didn't know. They go, you got to be accredited by the MPAA. I said, oh, okay. So stupid me, I called the MPAA. I wanted to go by there and say, hey, I want to do movie reviews. They're like, you can't do it that way. I'm like, well, what do I have to do? You got to get 5 producers, 5 directors to write you a letter. And I go, Michael, the people they suggested was Steven Spielberg, Francis Ford Coppola, and someone else. I'm like, I'm never going to get these people to do that. I'm a nobody at this point. But what they didn't tell me is that I could go through and do public access and have 5 different directors, and I could be the host producer of that. And that's where Movie Reviews and More came from. So I was the first one to be accredited through being a public access and getting it through my friend Bill Margot on the adult side of things. So if it weren't for Bill, my old co-host, my original co-host, I would have never have been accredited. And I kept that letter for like many years because I was like, wow, I bucked the system. But I also did the homework. So that's why I say that, going back to and putting you up here, because you are when it comes to a lot of things. Like I could never do gossip, but I admire it. I would always strain my head to look to see what's he writing about today out of California. And I just thought it was always unique. So my hat would always go off to you because I've always admired you from a distance.
Thank you. Well, Video store clerks always know everything about movies. That, like you say, I mean, they're the people you used to go to for advice on any kind of movie. They know every genre, they know every director. I'm really getting off lately on learning about different directors I didn't really follow in the past. People like William Castle. I mean, I always went for the obvious, like Alfred Hitchcock, John Waters, but William Castle, and even way more obscure than William Castle, like Herschel Gordon Lewis. There's a guy who made a movie called The Incredible Mix-Up Zombies. I don't even know his name.
Are you getting into a lot of the cult films? Yes, yeah.
Called, and some of them are really god awful, but there's something genius about them still that you can find. And there's something about the inspiration. Ed Wood, I'm getting into Ed Wood's films because he was an inspiration, because if he could do it, anybody could do it.
Absolutely.
If you look at some of those films. And I love Leonard Glenda. That movie is total craziness.
Well, you
Even
looked
more
at
than
it for what it was if you
crazy.
wanted to be a filmmaker. See, I never wanted to be a filmmaker. I never wanted to be that actor. I always wanted to recommend films. That was just me. And then I would look up to a lot of those as I, back in the day, you print writers, you guys were the pinnacle of it. What we were supposed to do on the TV and radio side. We didn't have what you guys do. I could never still do what you do, but I could just send a paragraph or just sentence, just tell people, hey, go see this. Even though the written word was always still, till this day, I think it's a lost art.
Well, not necessarily. Everyone on earth is a writer now. When I was in the 80s, I was a big columnist. There were like 8 columnists. Everyone on earth has a blog, a Facebook page. And it turns out a lot of people are very witty and very insightful. I feel like I'm almost competing with the entire population of the world. By the way, I'm also getting off on Rudy Ray Moore. Eddie Murphy did a movie last year called Dolomite Is My Name. That was
It was really good.
It was good. I mean, the real Rudy Ray Moore is way raunchier, and so was Lady Reed, who was in the movie. She was one of his accomplices in filmmaking. She was a really raunchy stand-up comic. In the movie, they made her more of a singer. But I've been looking at the real Rudy Ray Moore movies like Dolomite and Disco Godfather, and they're really fantastic. I'm enjoying them. They're free on YouTube. People, it's a treasure trove on YouTube. Really start searching, and you're going to find amazing stuff. And they'll recommend, like, oh, if you like this, you'll love this. They'll recommend a lot more similar things to what you're looking for.
When would you say you started getting into watching stuff on YouTube? What made you go that direction, would you say? Because a lot of millennials, that's what they go to for their news and everything. That's why I asked.
I always did, but with the lockdown, first of all, I have a movie club, and we used to meet at my house every several weeks. We now do it twice a week on Zoom because everyone's available. No matter where we're situated, we can all get together on Zoom. We can invite extra friends, and I can share screen, go to YouTube, pick a movie, and everybody sees the movie. I'm also very cheap, so I was really happy to learn that all these movies are free of charge. But we've also done some where you rent them. It's $2.99. It's no big deal. We did one that we rented called Oy Vey, My Son is Gay from 2009. It's truly terrible. It's a comedy with Lady Kazan as a Jewish mother of a son who turns out to be gay. She thinks he's going out with Carmen Electra, but he's not. He's actually living with Jay Rodriguez from the original Queer Eye. I recommend good, bad movies just because I grew up with good, bad movies, and I always managed to find good in them. And any movie to me, I mean, as long as it isn't just static, if there's something, if there's acting, casting, accessories, scenery, dialogue, to me, it takes me away. It's a cathartic experience. Cleopatra was another one I saw as a kid with Liz Taylor. And it was one of the most spectacular things that you could ever imagine. And it was damn boring, too.
It's funny
because it went on.
When I think of that movie, I think of her ordering her Italian food from Chasen's to Italy.
Yeah, well, at least Richard Burton was co-starring. So normally, if he was in a movie in Europe, she would have to trail him to make sure he doesn't sleep around. This time, she could just watch him because they were co-starring. But yeah, her accent was not very ancient Egyptian. It was like, Caesar, what's burning? Whatever. I love movies.
When it comes, Michael, when it comes to your books, which one of your books would you recommend for readers or people that don't know of your work? And why would you recommend it?
If you want an example of my work, there are 2 collections. La Dolce Musto, Writings by the World's Most Outrageous Columnist, and Fork on the Left, Knife in the Back. And it's really a little bit of everything with some original essays as well. if you want a look at the real scene of the 80s in New York, which includes the nightlife, the fashion, the music, my book Downtown is just, I have to look back on it and say I really did a good job in compiling that moment. And it's all the personalities, including Jean-Michel Basquiat and Keith Haring and everyone who made that decade very special in New York. And Manhattan on the Rocks is a novel that I wrote which spans all the scenes. It has like Andy Warhol type characters and uptown, downtown, socialites, drag queens. It's all in there. So check out Manhattan on the Rocks if you just want an escapist look at old New York. I'm in every documentary known to man right now because I've been through everything. I've been through nightlife. I've been through ACT UP activism. I've been through Occupy Wall Street. And I remember everything. So if you look at a lot of documentaries on Netflix, I'm usually on them telling my experience. I've become like this gay Buddha or something. And I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to be like a repository for the history because it has to be told. But I'm also glad to be plugged into the current. I'm very happy when I get a call to comment on what's happening now because I'm very plugged in.
And that's true. And I think that's one reason why I would always read what you had to say, because you're there. I mean, you've got to be there. It's an honor to be there to go through all that stuff. If you think of the decades, 70s, 80s, 90s, or the O's, which ones were more memorable to you and why? Because if I'm thinking from Connecticut to Los Angeles, for me, I'm thinking maybe the 80s, but I don't know, but you were there.
The 80s were incredible. I'll say the 70s were pretty amazing for me because I went to Columbia, graduated in 76. I was an out gay man. It was actually a really good time to be an out gay man in New York City. I was doing well with my career, just starting out. I wasn't that jaded yet. And New York and the country were in a terrible state because there was Watergate and there was Vietnam War. New York City was in shambles. There was lots of crime. But out of nowhere came disco and Studio 54, which was the ultimate disco. So I would get in because I knew the co-owner, Steve Rebell, and this is after the Stonewall Rebellion and really before AIDS. So like I say, it was a great window of time to be a gay man, and the nightlife was extraordinary. The 80s for me was even better because I got my column in The Voice in 84. I became the center of so much going on. It was an extraordinary time. The nightlife was great. Sadly enough, it was a horrible decade as well because AIDS started in the early 80s and decimated so many people that I knew and so many icons that I had. So, I mean, every decade is a mixed, is a mixed bag. It's never going to be all happy memories.
As someone who was openly gay and out at that point, how scared were you? Because I think of that right to this day, of what that must have been like, because I'll never know that feeling, but I can see like little remnants of that. But again, wasn't there, but I was with a couple of my friends who didn't know what it was.
It was very scary because, first of all, you're filled with grief over the people dying. You're filled with terror about yourself. Am I next? And we were filled with rage because President Reagan wasn't doing anything about it, wasn't even mentioning it. It just was not on the radar. And when the White House finally mentioned it, when they were asked about it at a briefing, they made a joke about it. So that encouraged the rage. But the great thing was in 1987, Larry Kramer and some others founded ACT UP, which was the AIDS activist group. And I joined it just to channel my emotions. And basically I would go to nightclubs all night and write about that. And then during the day, I'd be chanting in the street and going to rallies for ACT UP. And it got me in the habit of protesting because, like I said, there was Occupy Wall Street. Before that, there was anti-war in Iraq things. Now I've been on a million Black Lives Matter rallies. I'm spending most of my life screaming in the street.
So now it really is time for you to write your autobiography then, in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess people would like to see me come out with a memoir. I could do that at any time. That's why I'm not rushing it. And since I'm still living
it's
my
easy
life,
for you to write a book then, huh? Where it was challenging for others. Would that be correct then?
I don't have a problem writing. I would not have gone into writing if it was challenging for me. The hardest thing is the first sentence. You kind of have to start it. But once I get that first sentence, it just flows. And then I go back and tweak it. It becomes a work in progress. But that's what I said before. If you're a young writer and you have a problem with deadlines, if you get neurotic about it, don't go into writing. You're not cut out for it. You can't just change your deadline and say, oh, I'll turn it in next week. Right? I mean, it's really based on, boom, where's the work? And the work you turn in has to be clean. It has to be ready. If you make your editor's life easy, in other words, they don't have to do a complete rehaul of what you turned in, they'll love you. And one of the reasons I got the column at The Voice is the pieces I did before that for The Voice, they loved. I turned in interviews. I did Joe Morton, the actor, who's one of the first people I did for The Voice, and they were like, wow, you did a good job. It's well structured. It's well written. It doesn't need any work. Maybe tweak a semicolon, make it a colon. That's about it. And editors adore a writer who makes their life easy. If you can't do that, I've seen writers that obsess and they pull their hair and they're sweating and they can't, oh, how do I write this article? Do something else.
Well, you just verified why I didn't become a writer, because I didn't think I was a good writer. I'm more of a better storyteller, but I'm more long-winded. Again, it goes back to why I could admire those writers, especially those film critic writers, and even, Liz Smith, on the gossip title stuff, because I thought it was fascinating, because I couldn't do that, nor would I would do that, but I enjoyed reading it, but I always felt like this.
Yeah,
I wanted to be that person.
But there's so much, there's an art to do it. There's an art to doing an interview show. There's an art to doing a podcast. So there are different ways of expression. A writer might not be good at those things. So I wouldn't feel bad about not being a great writer. There are other ways to do what you do. There's so many podcasts. I had no idea. I looked up podcasts recently. Everyone on earth has a podcast. I didn't even realize that.
And that's true.
I usually don't do podcasts because they don't.
Everybody can have one, but that doesn't mean everybody is good. And then it's the same thing. Everybody can be a writer, but that doesn't mean every person can be a good writer. I don't know another one of you. Who would you compare you with? I don't think anybody. I think there's only one of you.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of people have fallen through the cracks. But I think I'm pretty unique. For better or worse, it's hard to imitate me and what I do. I come from a very unique perspective. My experience is unlike anybody else. Yeah, like you say, some people that do podcasts are terrible. I don't do every podcast that's offered to me. Some of them have like 3 viewers or something, 3 listeners. It's not even worth your time. And I believe that you should choose your triumphs just like you choose your battles in life. But you've got like 1 million YouTube
almost
watchers.
I'm 17,000 away from 1 million. I'll be there between now and Wednesday. We have 7 different numbers. 3.6 million out of Tennessee alone and counting. And I've never aired those shows on TV on one site. And that's in Trump country. So that's what makes it very unique, because I am not a Trump supporter. A couple of my co-hosts are. I've learned to live with that. And I'm okay with that because it's about the money, but not selling out. And so for you, you've never been a sellout. So it's interesting to see those people who are like this, who kept this is me, I'm not gonna change. And if you think you're gonna change me, it's not gonna work. That's you. And that's why I admire it. And that's why I look up to that, because you could see it in the writing. Not a lot of people can do that.
Thank you. Well, yeah, like I say, I was writing about drag queens in the 80s when it wasn't popular. I was writing about transgender. I did very well. I made money. I saved it, thankfully. I wrote 4 books. If you think it's easy to get to where I got to by being openly gay and write about transgender people in the 80s, I would say you're wrong.
Ooh.
I'm talking to people out there. This is very like patting myself on the back, but I did not do things the easy way. There were times when I could have closeted myself. I could have been less outspoken. I could have not gone after big guns and tried to take people down. But I did. I think I felt reckless. I felt like, well, the whole world's ending, so just write whatever you want. And now here I am many years later, and I actually benefited from being outspoken. Because a lot of people now who were against what I was writing then are like, I think you were right. You were onto something, By talking about homophobia and how wrong it is, by talking about how wrong the closet is, how celebrities should be out of the closet.
But look where we are.
So
So your writing was, so let's say this, you were way ahead of your time. As you say, you might not be able to see the future, but it didn't matter because you were creating of what you were seeing. And I think that's brilliant. I look at where we are now, and I look at RuPaul. When I first met RuPaul, it's in 1998. And he was very shy. I was at a Halloween party. I have a picture of me, him, and one of my other co-hosts at that point. And I looked to where he is now, just an example. Whether people like him or not, look where he is. He's an Emmy winner now. So I look at it as growth. I look at it as the world has changed, I think, in a more positive way, and it's still evolving. But if you're not changing, adapting, adjusting, you're not going to make it in today's world. That's how I see it.
And RuPaul's an example of someone in the 80s I was friends with. She would perform every night at the clubs. I was writing about her in my Village Voice column. The mainstream media wasn't really writing about her. It was like Details magazine, which at the time was a downtown style magazine before it became Condé Nast. And I was writing about RuPaul. And RuPaul and I went to Atlanta, her hometown. We performed together at Club Rio, the big nightclub at the time. And then Ru made it very big in the 90s with the song and the VH1 talk show. And then had a kind of down period after that. Believe it or not, when she had a down period, I was really hot because I was on every VH1 and E! TV show there was. And Ru and I went to Philadelphia for the Gay Film Festival for a documentary we were in. And I was getting all the attention and Ru was not. And I was like, this is a weird switch. It's like an Ingmar Bergman, like, I'm the hot one now. But I just had a feeling, I'm usually wrong with predictions, but I was like, she's going to get a second chapter. And her second chapter is like 800 times bigger than even the first one. It's just extraordinary. And people are trying to bring her down now and, you know, nitpicking about things they don't like about her. But I think it's a lot of jealousy.
Absolutely. Can you give your social media links for people who may not have them?
Yes, I have a page on Facebook, but I'm at the Maximum Friends, but I also have a fan page. On Instagram, I'm Musto184. And on Twitter, I am Mikey, M-I-K-E-Y, Musto, M-U-S-T-O.
So we got about
Michael
5
Musto
minutes.
on Facebook.
Talk about if
You can follow me on Facebook.
If you have, you know, if you had to mention 10 of your best interviews out of all the people you've done, and then 10 of your worst, who might they be and why? For me, I would always say, for me, Robin Williams is one because he turned me on to Doctors Without Borders. And I always felt if I had had his number and his email, I think I could have helped save his life because I would have been in constant contact with him. So I always say like him, I say like George Clooney. Who would be of yours, you say 10 of your favorites, you had to name them?
Robin Williams was one of my best because I said something that made him laugh. And it was sincere, like he really thought it was funny. And I was like, I made Robin Williams laugh. Another great one was Brad Pitt when he was up and coming. And when I greeted him in his hotel room, he said, oh, I hear you're the king of New York. And I said, Queen. And then I thought, oh shit, how is he gonna react to that? And he loved it. Because, you know, he and Angelina were always very gay positive. Sandra Bernhard was always one of the most fun interviews. She pretty much came out to me as a lesbian on the phone when I was interviewing her for Spin magazine. And Carrie Fisher was another great interview. She once went into the other room, came out with her panties and said, here, wear this to my book party tonight. And I sniffed them and they were scented. Is this a family show? I hope not. Some of the early ones I did were incredible, including Liberace, who was in the closet till the day he died, but kind of was acknowledging to me because he told me a joke about a woman with a large penis. I mean, he was talking about like a cross-dresser, but it was almost like it was just for me. Like it was like an intimation, like we're of the same cloth kind of thing. And he was brilliant. Yeah, he was dying of AIDS and put on a show at Radio City Music Hall where you would never know. He came flying in on a rope. He was in these sequins, did an extraordinary show because the man just lived to perform and he wanted to die performing. Zsa Zsa Gabor was another one who was offensive, but just a great interview. And I have to say, James Woods, who I now think is the lowest piece of garbage who ever lived, gave me an incredible interview back when he was this outspoken guy who was calling, you know, blowing the whistle on Hollywood. Of course, now he's the biggest offender in every way. But it was just a brilliant, brilliant interview. And too many interviews, as I'm sure you know, are just boring and bland, and people promoting certain projects. And it was a labor of love, blah, 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 boring. I don't do red carpet interviews because you only get those kind of boring sound bites.
Yeah.
But the people I mentioned went beyond that and knew what I was looking for. I was looking for a good copy. They gave me great copy. You're never going to get to know your interview subject. Someone could live with them for 20 years and not really know them.
Yep.
But as long as you play the game together and and reveal something about yourself in an entertaining way, then I appreciate an interview subject. A lot of them are in my collections. RuPaul was also a great interview.
A couple of the ones that you didn't, but
I never met Meryl Streep. I never met Meryl Streep, though. It's like, I want to meet Meryl Streep.
That's interesting. How did that not happen? Wow.
I've been in the room with her, and I just never had the nerve. But I was on the Oprah Winfrey Show before she went. When Oprah was local in Chicago, I was on the show. So I did get to meet Oprah that time.
Hey.
It's before she went huge mainstream.
You know, it's funny. I think of Brad Pitt, one of the best producers now. His Plan B, those last couple Oscars, his films winning that. You know, I think of Sandra Bernhard. Boy, was she outspoken, and my hat would go out to her because I think she knew where she was, and good for her. And James Woods, one of the smartest people I ever met, but also I think he's one of the dumbest ones now because of where he lies right now. You know, it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't get it.
Yeah, he's brilliant and deeply damaged. You mentioned James Woods, Sandra. And Brad Pitt. He won the Oscar for acting. He finally won the Oscar. Yeah.
Yep.
And he just seems like a charming. I was so nervous interviewing him. I kept spilling my tea all over my jacket, and he kept running to the bathroom to soak up a rag and like wipe me off. And I was like, this guy's beyond charming, you know. And then he remembered me, and it's a lot of times celebrities will remember their interviewers. Suzanne Summers, of all people, she's not stupid. She remembered exactly when I interviewed her and where and what the hotel room was. A lot of those 80s.
That's me, Michael. I'm like that.
Are you?
Yeah. Yeah, I can tell you everything kind of right up until 10 years old. And then certain things within, someone mentioned something, I'm like, and then I'll spill out everything they said, even the sentence that they said.
But how about your short-term memory?
It's still pretty good because, you know, I never did the drug thing. I never been married. I don't have any kids, and I'm 60, you know. I always admired all these people who did all these things, you know, and I always said you should continue that tradition, but better or worse, and just build on top of that. I want to make sure people remember certain people like yourself because they weren't there. And if you got to go back and pay, if you fail to pay homage to the past, there is no future. My co-host would always say that.
Well, that's a lot of people have said to me, how do you produce so much work? You're so prolific. I don't have boyfriends, no husband, no kids. I don't even have like a potted plant. I don't have a pet. So there are no distractions from my work. And my work is intertwined with my personal life. If I go to see a movie with a friend, I'm going to write about it. If I go on a trip with a friend, I'll write about it. It's all intertwined. It's 24/7. It's the most enchanting job. Really, I recommend it for anybody to be a columnist who writes about entertainment. You get paid to do what you would have done for nothing, actually. And then you get called to go on TV, and it's exciting. And
here's the thing.
It's just the right level of success. You're never going to be.
Well, it's funny. For 10 years, actually 11 years, Michael, I did do it for nothing. I didn't get paid to do it. I just wanted to be there. I wanted to help promote that film or that TV show or that book. And I just knew I had to outlast everybody. And I was never syndicated. I was always the person that shouldn't have been there. And I always tell people, you know, everybody in the room was white except for me and one of my other friends. And then he had two of the bigger outlets, and then I had nothing. We're still friends till this day. All those people are gone. And that's kind of unfortunate. And then I look at it to where we are today. We don't know where ever do another person-to-person interview. They may not happen based on the age of certain people, and they really don't have to. And then now we have Zoom or still telephone, right?
Well, you stuck to it, and you know what? The goodwill that you engender by doing good work, it pays back. But in New York, you can't do anything for free because it's so expensive to live here.
Exactly. That's why I didn't move to New York.
That's
the reason why.
Yeah, I don't recommend that.
All right, Michael. It's been an honor and pleasure to talk to you. Please give your social media links one more last time, please.
Yes, on Twitter, I'm Mikey Musto. Mikey, MIKEYMUSTO. On Instagram, Musto184. And you can follow me on Facebook, or you could also follow me on my fan page on Facebook.
And with that, it's been an honor and pleasure to finally talk to him, besides just read about his stuff that he's had over for years. And hey, this is Brian Sebastian, Movie Reviews and More, the Women's Broadcast TV Network, ITube 247 out of Tennessee, and womenontv.tv. And if you see someone out of smile, please give them one of yours because the world needs it. And we will see you next week.